Ambassador Parsan, so nice to see you today.
It's a pleasure as always, Mr. Gelfuso.
Thank you for coming in today. You're here at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center. It's our privilege to have you back. Can you tell us a little bit about Trinidad and Tobago, the economy, the culture, and all your country has to offer?
Well, I can spend many, many hours telling you about it, but thanks for the opportunity. And Trinidad, it's a beautiful Caribbean island. We're about 2,000 square miles, a population of about 1.4 million people. And we're the southernmost island of the chain of Caribbean islands. The way I like to put it is we are so far south, we're also north. In fact, point to point, we are 7 miles off mainland South America from Venezuela. And we come from a very rich, diverse culture. Historically, post-slave trade, we had a lot of indented servants from India, some from China. We had a lot of merchants coming from the Middle East. So we ended up with a very diverse population, ethnically, hence culturally, spiritually, religiously, culinarily. The way I like to put it, every league you can think of, Trinidad and Tobago is diverse. Economically, about 106, 107 years ago, we discovered oil. So we became a very energy-based economy over many years. And our economy has really morphed from an oil-based economy to a gas-based economy today. And it has led to a very robust GDP, and we have a very strong production base. We run a GDP per cap of just under 20,000 USD per head in the country, and our economic indicators represents great stability for our country. We run about a 25% public debt as a ratio to GDP. We have controllable inflation, a relatively low level of unemployment, and a very high level of tertiary level education. So economically, we are essentially the most robust in the Caribbean, and we have been contributing quite a bit in terms of the energy resources to the United States over many years. In fact, just about 2010, about 44% of the LNG requirements of the United States came from Trinidad and Tobago.
That's an impressive statistic. And you know, the energy sector is unique in that it has some opportunities and some challenges wherever it lie.
Sure.
What are you finding to be some of those opportunities and challenges?
Well, from an opportunity standpoint, as I said, we sort of morphed from an oil-based economy to a gas-based economy. In fact, I will tell you, the records would show Trinidad and Tobago, we're the first country to monetize gas. And we went further downstream into using gas to lead us into another production base, specialty chemicals. Interestingly, we are the world's #1 exporter of ammonia, methanol, and we're amongst the top 3 in urea production. And therein lies opportunity in terms of vertical diversification of the energy sector for the average manufacturer. Most of those specialty chemicals I mentioned are used in the production phase, warmers, everything in this room. The resins on the paint, fibers on the carpet, dinnerware, etc. So it provides an opportunity for concentric circles of light manufacturing industries coming out of the downstream energy sector. Challenges. I think you would be aware that we had an economic downturn dating back to 2008, and we are seeing evidence of it improving. As a result of that, the patterns of consumption changed in the United States. So it forced Trinidad and Tobago to really look at other economic spaces to export our gas. So it has also allowed us to look at places like China, India, parts of Asia, Europe, South America, the Caribbean, to supply gas. A clear challenge coming out for us, and we are looking closely at understanding the model, is shale gas production in the United States. It's no secret that some of the import terminals are now ramping up in the United States to become net export terminals. So we have also been looking at the opportunities to how can we partner with companies in the US to assist in that aspect of energy production. It's interesting that we have also been able to, from an educational standpoint, create a very high demand for the net export of energy skill sets coming out of Trinidad and Tobago. Therein lies an opportunity. Having said that, many of our skilled workers are on the continent in Africa and many other places in North America, assisting energy companies to leverage the natural resources of oil and gas.
So in addition to the energy sector, you have the agricultural sector, the tourism sector, light and presumably heavy manufacturing. What are some of the industries that you think lend themselves the best for U.S. companies to get involved in?
Good question. Outside of the energy sector, which is multiple, ICT, for an example, we are looking at that ICT space to really develop Trinidad and Tobago as an ICT hub for the region. In fact, the government, we have identified a very large area of land called Tamina InTech Park, where we wish for companies to look at opportunities for hardware manufacturing, software programming, call centers, actual spaces where back office can be used to supply services to the financial sector and many other sectors in the economy, not just ours, but others, for development. Agriculture is clearly an area of interest to us, but not just the raw aspect of food production. We can talk about agro-processing, food preservation with the intention to export. We have been paying quite a bit of attention to that recently. And it's ample opportunity for U.S. firms to look at it as a space to operate in the Caribbean. We have urbanization and the financial services sector. We have many large projects that are in trail in Trinidad and Tobago, so we are clearly looking for opportunities to partner with subject matter experts in various areas. We look at schools, community centers, bridges, roads, ports, seaports, airports. These are all spaces that lends itself to partnership arrangements. And the government is very keen on this, looking at what is being offered and how best can we negotiate a mutually agreeable set of terms and conditions to lend itself to proper business and business practices in time to come. The area of financial planning, financial management, capital market development. Clearly there's a space in the region for the actual, we are fairly virginal when it comes to venture capitalism. I think it's a space that the US firms who have that experience can look at Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean, as a matter of fact, to operate in that environment. A lot of, fair amount of cash flow from the region circulates to Trinidad and Tobago, clearly because of the energy sector. Okay. And when one looks at opportunities in insurance, the financial services in terms of banking, etc., it's a wide open space for companies to look at.
Speaking of the financial center, I had read that Trinidad and Tobago is known as the financial hub of the Caribbean. Can you tell me a little bit about where that name or moniker came from?
Well, the word hub suggests a portal. And from a virtual and physical standpoint, there is a fair amount of cash flow from a Caribbean perspective passing through Trinidad and Tobago. And not only that, I mean, the physical infrastructure, we have been looking at actually putting up and we have done so, physical buildings to facilitate IFCs, for example, an International Financial Center. And we are very much looking at partnership arrangements to allow that to materialize over time. Okay. Therefore, the word hub can be in terms of the actual movement of cash and cash flow in the region, as well as a physical hub, a portal for like transactions.
And now a very traditional economic sector for the Caribbean is tourism. I've read that tourism is maybe 10 to 15% of your GDP. Can you tell us a little bit about the opportunities and challenges to increasing tourism?
Sure. You're right, the figures have about 10%, 11% of our overall GDP for Trinidad and Tobago, but let me explain this. Tourism, from a traditional tourism standpoint, it's an interesting phenomenon for us. Trinidad, it's a vibrant island, it's industrialized, it's very energetic. It contrasts a bit with Tobago, which is more green and serene. That Tobago supports more a greater concept of traditional tourism as you know it. We have, in Trinidad in particular, we also experience seasonal tourism. And in case you did not know, we have what we consider the greatest show on earth, our carnival. In fact, our carnival envies the carnival in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and I dare say Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Yes, Mardi Gras in New Orleans. And we have been able to use carnival as a ramp, as a platform to really spread our culture worldwide. Our carnival seeded the carnivals in Miami, Labor Day in New York, in many cities in the United States, Caribbean in Toronto. And interestingly, a big part of carnival is steel pan, the steel drums. We invented it. Let me say it again. Trinidad and Tobago we take ownership of the steel pan. And we use that as a hub for tourism, really. It's seasonal in nature. But we wish not really compete with the traditional sun, sand, sea, and surf of some of the other Caribbean islands. So we have been paying quite a bit of attention to developing niche areas of tourism. I speak of meetings and conferences, honeymoons, sports is a big area for us. And interestingly, given our strategic geographic location, we are so far south, we missed the hurricane belt. On average, there are 19 storms passing through the region per year. So a lot of the yachts and boats and ships in the region gravitate southward during the hurricane season. It has developed a fairly heavy, interesting sector for us, the yachting and maritime economy. And as a result, yachting tourism is also a version of tourism that has potential for even greater development.
Regarding international trade, which countries would you say are your largest trading partners, and what are some of your primary imports and exports, sir?
Sure. Our number one, we have CARICOM, first of all, our regional partners. We have the United States, clearly. We have China as a major partner. We have India as a good partner. We have Canada. We also do a fair amount of exports in terms of energy to the Dominican Republic. There's a fair amount with Spain and the rest of the EU, Chile, and some of the small islands of the smaller countries of the Asia-Pacific region. In terms of exports, clearly it's energy, liquid natural gas. We do, of course, as I mentioned earlier, urea, ammonia, methanol. We do some lighter distillate products of petroleum processing. From an import standpoint, food. From the United States, we do a fair amount in terms of chemicals, machinery. Those are some of the major tradable components for us.
Great. You mentioned CARICOM, and very recently we had the honor of hosting a CARICOM event here at the Reagan Building that convened about 15 ambassadors, and you were involved in spearheading the event, which talked about investment into the CARICOM region. Sure. Can you tell us a little bit about CARICOM as an entity and a little bit about your role? Sure.
Well, CARICOM, for the sake of information, is really a regional partnership. It's about 40 years old. The treaty it started with the signing of the CARICOM countries, about 15 of us coming together to sign what is called the Treaty of Chaguaramas 40 years ago. It started off with less partners, it's built to 15 today. It represents an opportunity to trade with between 15 and 16 million persons. Interestingly, CARICOM is chaired by the sitting head of government for a period of 6 months. So as we speak, the Honorable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, is chairing CARICOM in the Caribbean. It puts me in a position to chair CARICOM here in Washington in the United States. It has also given me the flexibility to set an agenda for activities here in Washington. With consultations with my fellow ambassadors in Washington, I decided to set a fairly heavy commercial agenda. And having said that, the model that we used, we basically went around many cities in the United States. We started off in Richmond, Virginia. We did the District of Columbia. We went to Baltimore, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Delaware. Just came back from Detroit, Michigan. Hopefully we'll be heading to Miami at some point and doing others. The idea behind it really is for us to go to these cities and look at the opportunities to fortify relationship with government, with business. So we basically had 4 sort of pillars we were working with. Clearly one is commercial. So everywhere that we went, we tried to do a business forum, and I really want to thank the Ronald Reagan Building and the International Trade Center for facilitating us here. We had a wonderful opportunity for each island to come and offer themselves and their services to the businessmen that were in the room. And likewise, there's reciprocity in business. We also wanted to hear what has been offered in each state and in each city. We also use the opportunity to have conversations with the governors and the mayors and the legislators about cultural exchange opportunities, for example. We would love Caribbean art in their museums. We would love Caribbean plays in their theaters. We would love Caribbean movies in their cinemas. Likewise, how can we exchange cultural items back in the Caribbean?
As you held the investment conference here at the Reagan Building and in Detroit and in some of the other locations, did you feel like U.S. investors were excited about the opportunities that you had to offer?
Absolutely. In fact, I will tell you, first of all, it was it was an awareness campaign. Because very often you hear of islands, you hear of countries, but you're not sure geographically, where is it located, what is this island about, how do you spell it, for example. And it was, first of all, a tremendous success in terms of brand equity establishment and brand awareness building. That's the first point. Secondly, there was tremendous interest in the room for specific areas in specific countries. You know, for Trinidad and Tobago, there's a great deal of interest with energy and manufacturing, for example, and how can we actually establish industry there. We just came from Detroit. The records will show there was standing room only in the room. And as we grew, people began to understand there is traction here, and we are creating a portal in our mission at the embassy to really have those opportunities siphon in. And in many instances, we are actually already having conversations about having active trade missions to the Caribbean in 2014 and reciprocate with businessmen from our space coming to some of these cities to fortify the relationship. I mean, we're also looking at, it goes beyond commerce. We have been talking a fair amount with respect to education exchange opportunities. How can we take subject matter experts, request technical support in certain areas, and have them come to our space? And likewise, I think there are things we can share with the United States by our experts coming here. Students, for example, we can exchange students. We have a fairly heavy development agenda in some of the islands. And many states were interested in how can we work with you to assist reciprocally with development opportunities in each space.
It all sounds very positive, and as you've interacted with, it sounds like you've interacted with governors, probably mayors, and economic development officials. Do you also interact with members of Congress as you're advocating for your country? Yes,
very much so. In fact, our engagement with Congress, you know, let me say first of all, we have a fairly good, robust, hard-working caucus of members of Congress who are pro-Caribbean. They really assist us with the issues that we have at hand. You know, as Congress sets a legislative agenda, sometimes it's healthy for us to engage in meaningful conversation before some of these line items on the agenda gets into the pipeline. I mean, we have issues that we have been discussing issues, for example, of the Food Safety Modernization Act and how that may potentially affect the export of some Caribbean goods to the United States and vice versa, in keeping with the principles of the trade agreements that we have extant today with the United States, principally the Caribbean Basin Initiative. You know, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act are issues that affect foreign direct investment directly to our space. So, but there's always room for improvement. You know, sitting with members of Congress, we welcome the meaning behind the engagement, but I think I would like to see some conversations taken a couple steps before the specificity of issues. We're all busy people. Engagement tends to be issue specific, but sometimes it may help to, let's have a conversation on development, on culture, on commerce between our spaces. And I'm hoping over time that conversation matures to go along those lines.
Now, each year you have a very well-regarded investment week in Trinidad and Tobago. Could you tell us a little bit about that opportunity?
Oh. We have spent many years building this. It's actually dual purpose, really. It started off, it's principally a trade and investment convention. We have hundreds of exhibitors from many, many countries in the Americas converging on Trinidad and Tobago. It's generally between May and June of every year. And then recently, the Honorable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago took over chairmanship of the Commonwealth. As you know, our country was previously under British rule. And when we gained independence in 1962, we subsequently we became a republic in 1976. It meant we have a symbolic head of state, a substantive head of state at that, and we maintain ties with the Commonwealth. We are part of the Commonwealth. We thought it a wise idea to create a Commonwealth Investment Forum. So we started off as a Commonwealth Investment Forum that fed directly into a Trade Investment Convention. So it's a week of commercial activity. After we gave him the chairmanship of the Commonwealth, the Commonwealth Investment Forum morphed to become the Caribbean Investment Forum. So we have taken fairly strong delegations from the United States every year to Trinidad and Tobago to be part of that, and I really wish to invite your viewing and listening audience to that event next year. We'll happily put all the information on our website, for sharing with the general public to be part of those activities.
Sounds great. The Panama Canal expansion project will be complete in 2015. Ports along the U.S. eastern seaboard have been increasing capacity. Vice President Biden was there in May, and he has another trip in the region very shortly. What opportunities do you see for the CARICOM region to benefit from the Panama Canal expansion?
That's a million-dollar question.
Yeah, it is.
A lot of countries are paying attention. A lot of countries have shown expressions of interest in terms of what business opportunities can be had for it. In fact, from Trinidad and Tobago's standpoint, I was recently in Panama, standing on the canal, observing the machinations of the old set of locks and what the new set of locks can potentially mean. The implications for us would be that, for example, our LNG is transported in tankers. Super tankers can now traverse the canal. Therefore, one would think naturally that there's a potential for redistribution of global cargoes, be it energy, be it manufactured goods. So one has to really sit back and understand the implications of those changes in time to come. For us, we have been working very closely with the government of Panama. In fact, His Excellency was in Trinidad some time ago. My Prime Minister reciprocated with a visit to Panama. We are looking at putting bunkering facilities on the canal itself for energy storage. So there are opportunities for us. We're also seeing opportunities in terms of assisting us in developing our ports. We are so far south, but so far up north from a South America perspective, geographically and strategically, it will be an opportunity, a miss, for us not to capitalize on that opportunity post-Panamax 2015. And you mentioned Vice President Biden. If I may, it is of interest to understand that the Honorable Vice President of the United States was in Trinidad in May 2013. And as he left, His Excellency President Xi Jinping of China visited Trinidad and Tobago. And soon after that, we had a very high-level ministerial delegation from India in Trinidad and Tobago. As soon as India left, we had His Excellency the President of Venezuela in Trinidad and Tobago. The point being, there's a lot of focus in our space, and there's a lot of interest in our country, Trinidad and Tobago, posturing itself for bigger and better things to come in the region. And we really want to posture ourselves in that way, not just from a commercial standpoint, but surely a geopolitical standpoint, and what that could mean from a security standpoint, hemispherically, energy security in our space that we operate in.
And when the Vice President was there in May, I believe he signed the Trade and Investment Framework, also known as a TIFA here in shorthand. What do you feel the opportunities will be, having signed the Trade and Investment Framework Agreement with the United States for Trinidad and Tobago and for the CARICOM region? Because it is a regional agreement.
You're correct. That agreement was signed when His Excellency was there, and it was countersigned by CARICOM, by the representative from Haiti who was chairing at the time. We see it as a good opportunity to begin to rethink, review, restructure extant agreements as it pertains to trade between CARICOM and the United States. Right now, we are governed by the Caribbean Basin Initiative, and there are two pieces of legislation that anchors the Caribbean Basin Initiative, one being the Seabury Act of 1983. 1983 is a long time ago. Commerce has been recontextualized since then. So we see there's a great opportunity to rethink and restructure our agreements as it pertains to trade. Of course, after that fact, we had NAFTA coming along, we had the TPP in progress, the US having so many free trade agreements with Colombia, Panama, and many other players, Brazil in the region. That has implications to the Caribbean, those moves. Therefore, how does that affect us? We have been working very hard here in Washington, trying to flesh out the structure of TIFA and how that may operate. In fact, many of our subject matter experts and technical support staff from many of the Caribbean islands were recently in the United States last week, looking at having engagements with USTR, for example, and others, to see how we can incorporate aspects and components that are relevant to the Caribbean and the US in TIFA. I might use the opportunity to say that we wish to also include aspects of services. 70% of the economies of most Caribbean islands are based on the services industry. Yet our agreements does not include services. Therefore, how can we engage in meaningful conversation to include those aspects in this new agreement? So we look forward to fleshing it out and adding value to it as it becomes operational in time to come.
During the past 2, almost 3 years that you've been in the U.S., what do you consider to be the highlight of your tenure?
Well, the highlights of my time is no time. It's a very, very busy city. And you spend a lot of time engaging in, I actually don't just cover the U.S., I'm also ambassador to Mexico. And I'm also ambassador and permanent representative to the Organization of American States. So you have a fairly heavy OAS agenda. Democracy, hemispheric security, integral development issues to discuss. And it has been a tremendous learning opportunity for me as far as multilateralism goes. If I may engage Mexico, I see there's a great opportunity for me to develop and fortify commercial links with Mexico. In fact, I'm going there very shortly, and I hope to engage with the administration in a meaningful way to allow that to happen. As far as the U.S. agenda goes, of course, I think a highlight for me is really coalescing aspects of our diaspora and our representative bodies in the various states. I think we have made a fair amount of headway in engaging commercial activity in cities that we never had commercial activity before. Bringing to the forefront the legislative agenda and what the impact of that for my country. And I think, if I may, I believe in what I call legacy projects. I believe in looking at opportunities that have not been extant before, and how can you plant a seed and watch it blossom. Having said that, I think our mission for the last 3 years, we have been able to achieve about 3 or 4 legacy projects. One, I looked at the space here for energy, and I saw a great opportunity. There are 193 embassies, between 180 and 193, depending on how you see it, embassies and missions here in Washington. There was never really a forum where ambassadors and representatives can sit and talk about energy, specifically gas. So I partnered with the Natural Gas Roundtable and a couple other institutions to establish the very first Global Gas Council here in Washington. I'm happy to tell you we had 2 sets of meetings already, and we are about to engage in another interaction in December. And I'm the first chair of that Global Gas Council. I'll be handing it over to a fellow ambassador shortly. The second legacy project that we were able to complete successfully, we often speak of trade, and traditionally for the Caribbean, it's north-south trade. Trinidad and Tobago, we have been engaging in a very meaningful way many countries of Africa. In fact, we have a diplomatic presence in Pretoria, in South Africa, Kampala in Uganda, and Abuja in Nigeria. But we engage meaningfully in energy-wise with Botswana, Tanzania, Kenya, and the others I've called. I approached the OAS with a project that has not been done before here in Washington, and the Organization of American States supported me, and I wish to thank them for that, where we were able to host the very first Africa America's Business Forum. We had His Excellency the President of Haiti here. We had His Excellency the President of Namibia doing a presentation via video conferencing. I had the Honorable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago being here. And I'm proud to tell you we had over 54 countries represented at that business forum. We plan to repeat that event every other year for the first 5 engagements. And the third legacy project we were able to do, which I'm happy to say, was in sport. I realized I had a very interesting relationship with His Excellency the Ambassador of New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, India. And when I thought about it, I was trying to figure out what is the subliminal messaging or reason behind our relationship, and it was cricket. We are all cricket-playing nations of the Commonwealth. So I approached the Ambassador of New Zealand and I said, I have an idea. I wish for your support. Let us get together and have the very first Ambassadors Cricket Cup in Washington, D.C. And I'm happy to tell you it was launched successfully. We had 9 countries participating. Bangladesh won the cup, and we plan to annualize that event every year. It was a wonderful day. It was well covered, and we had it was fun, family and friends.
Well, from where we sit, you have a very impressive track record. You've been an incredibly forward-leaning ambassador, and I count myself fortunate to be able to call you a friend, and I thank you for your time here with us today.
Oh, it was my pleasure, and I'm humbled by even being here, and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.